hard to find women who lead companies in heavy engineering, but Anu Aga and Meher Padamji have done so, steering capital goods major Thermax through some tough turns over the last 20 years. In 1996, Anu took over as the chairperson of Thermax after her husband passed away. Those were tough times both at home and in business, and a period of learning, almost a baptism by fire for the mother and daughter duo. But it helped that both had worked at Thermax, Anu in the HR department and Meher as a chemical engineer in the ranks. So when I met up with Meher to talk about their journey, I began by asking her what her first assignment was like.
So Feroz and I, that's my husband and myself, we were in England and we were sort of thrown into the deep end. This was a company that wasn't doing well and we were asked to go and turn it around. So we had to do everything over there. We were only 5 of us in the office. We had to do manufacturing, purchase, administration, finance, I mean you name it, sales, service, everything. And very, very interesting times. I think my biggest learning was during these 4 years because we were really thrown into a very challenging situation. We had no money. It really taught me what cash flow meant as against just a bottom line. And there's a huge difference between the two. We had to literally manage hand to mouth. I mean, I remember times when Feroz had to actually travel by car to East Germany. At that time, East Germany was still there. And had to install a boiler, had to help paint the boiler because we didn't have enough money. Yes. So we really went through a very, very rough time. But it was so much learning for all of us. And it was great because I learned a lot in my personal life as well, because the two of us had just got married in 91 and it was nice to be away, just the two of us, in a new country, managing my own home. And so it was a great learning both in the business side as well as personally.
But the company also was very stressed out, right? I mean, that's essentially what the problem was. You were sent over there to manage affairs, and the subsidiary I'm talking about.
Yes.
And the subsidiary eventually turned around in that period. How did that turnaround happen, and what were the learnings around the turnaround?
Yeah, I think a number of things. One is we had a person who was a director in our company who was requested to travel with us and mentor us for a year. A person by the name of Dr. Joshi. He immediately decided, yes, I'll leave everything, my family behind and come and mentor these two. So I think his insight, he's an R&D man, so his insight into what really would sell in that market. We can't really sell what we produce in India. So what is it that customers in the UK were really looking for? So we sort of almost redid the entire marketing in that country, and then found that there were many things that we were doing very differently. So we changed that around. We changed our service levels in terms of how do we make sure that within 24 hours, if you have a capital good, you have to go and address a customer immediately. So we made many changes to the company, but I think the biggest was in terms of what are the products that are required for that market. But one of my biggest learnings was time management. I remember I was working from 9 to 9, Feroz too, and then I had my son 3 years into being in the UK, and the babysitter said you have to pick him up at 3 in the afternoon. So I thought, how the hell am I going to manage, finishing so much work? And you won't believe it, but just by prioritizing what was critical and what was important and what was less important, I got as much, if not more, covered from 9 to 3.
Yeah, but well, this was a period of learning, and you knew that you had your father's support back home, and everything was stable at home. What happened in 96 when your father passed away and your mother had to take in, and that's when you moved back in here? How difficult was that period? And from your standpoint, you saw your mother transform to the chairperson of Thermax. What was that journey like for her?
First of all, a very, very difficult period, because my dad had literally built the company. It was his vision, it was his taking people along with him, and he was a true visionary. So in that sense, I think the organization had lost somebody who really sort of knew what this company was capable of and where this company was headed. We had just gone public in 1995, a year before that. So suddenly it was not just us as shareholders, we had a whole host of outside shareholders. So again, there was a huge responsibility to the minority shareholders, to our employees. And so one was on the business side and the other, of course, the personal loss. And so it was very difficult. It was extremely difficult for my mother, who had been in HR for so many years and suddenly overnight had to take over. And with all these stakeholders at hand, it was not an easy job. And Feroze and I were there for her, but at the end of the day, the buck stopped at her. So even though we were on the board of the company, even though we were helping her, at the end of the day, she was the chairperson of the company. And I think it was remarkable in terms of what she went through. A person who I feel because she openly said that I don't know, I need help. And I think that one thing was really, really important in terms of the help and the warmth that she got from so many people around her. Very often when you're at the helm of an organization, it's very difficult to say I don't know, especially for men. Being a woman, and I guess being somebody who really didn't know how to handle this, a lot of people came forward to help out.
Now, if you look back, there was also some hard decisions to be taken, and I think part of that, when I go through what you went through, is the fact that she was quick to get in a BCG, she was quick to get in structure into the entire thing and hold it all together. So, what are the business lessons? Because at the end of the day, it was also crisis management from a business point of view.
First is in terms of saying we're out of our depth and we need help. So that's when we brought in BCG. I think once BCG came in, there were a lot of decisions to be taken. For example, during my father's time, the portfolio had grown beyond energy and environment. It had grown into a number of areas. We were into capacitors, resistors, we were into paint systems, we were into bottled water, we were into many, many areas. And we had to take decisions like, should we close down certain businesses? Should we sell off certain businesses? Do we have to ask people to leave? That was one of the toughest calls that we had to make. We also decided to change the entire board of the company and bring in independent directors, more independent directors, and have the family move out from an executive role to a non-executive role. I think that's again one of the toughest decisions that I've ever made, and I'm sure it was very tough for Feroze and for Anu. But we made those decisions, and looking back, it's the best decision we've ever made.
Dominate Indian business, and many of them are having a tough time letting go as their businesses grow, the stakes get higher, and new generations enter the firm. In 2004, Anu Aga made headlines when she stepped down as the chairperson of Thermax at just 62, passing the mantle to her daughter Meher, who again raised eyebrows when she decided to step back and take on a non-executive role. Meher says what prompted her and her family to do this was the need to get the best talent and a realization that often it makes more sense for a promoter to step back. So looking back, was this the right decision?
I would really say it's the best decision that we have taken as a family, because I think it really, first of all, opens doors for anyone in the organization who's capable to climb up the ladder, for anyone who's capable to take the CEO position. So that position is not held by a family member today. And I think we've got a very capable team because of that. You attract more talent because of that. And I think for family businesses, it's a great thing, because when you are away from it and sitting at 30,000 feet, you tend to look at it very, very differently to when you're sitting in it and part of it day in and day out.
This is not something that most family businesses think of. In fact, you are actively involved with family-run businesses and how to actually take them to the next level. Is it a gender thing there, where men don't want to give away, they want to keep it for the heirs, while because you and your mother were part of this journey, you decided that, hey, it's the organization before the individual. Not that men always, it might be the wrong way to phrase it, but it's just, was that a gender thing?
I think you've got to ask my mom that, but I think it's relatively easier because mom didn't actually build it from scratch. If my dad had been there, would it have been easier for him to let go at the age of 62 the way my mom did? I'm not so sure. In fact, I'm not sure at all. And I also think that very often men don't have anything to do other than their work. Their work is 100% of their life. And then, so if they retire, what are they going to do with their time? Whereas women, even while they're working, they're involved in so many different activities. Whether it's with an NGO, or whether it's with your children, or whether it's with friends, or whatever it is. We tend to have a more full, wholesome life. So in that sense, for us to let go becomes that much easier because there's so many other areas that we can indulge ourselves into.
Would you follow your mother's footsteps and do the same? And when you pass on the baton to your kids, if they do come into the workforce, how have you, I'm sure you must have thought of this.
See, my kids are still quite young. So having said that, I'm very clear that I will also retire at an age where I can pass it on to whoever. I am also very clear that if my children want to join the family business, again, they start at the bottom. They do not have to be executives in the business at all. In fact, if they want to remain as non-executives, I would love them to, but they have to learn what this business is about for them to ask the right questions in the board. So I'm very, very clear about that because I would really love my kids to do what they genuinely enjoy doing.
Is this a mindset that is coming in a lot of the younger generation, Meher? Because suddenly I see a lot of people talking about trusteeship, not active participation. How much work do you think is happening within families, and is this a growing conversation?
I think people are beginning to think about it in India. I think many families are still far away from moving completely out of operations. But I think people are beginning to think about it a lot more. People are also beginning to think about the fact that you can do something else other than being in your family business, although it's very difficult. But if that is not something that really gives you a kick, then maybe it's something else, and people are beginning to feel maybe there is another life other than family businesses. Also with women coming into the family business, I still feel that we've got a long way to go. I think women very often take over a family business by default. That is when they are the only sibling or they have no siblings. And it's still difficult for a woman to take over if she does have a brother in the family.
It's very patriarchal even now.
It's still very patriarchal, but it's not only in India. I think it's world over.
But is it changing to see a lot of women standing up and saying, why not me?
I think not enough yet, but I think it is changing. I mean, you do see more and more women saying, why can't I? But it hasn't really made that shift yet, and I think that will take a while.
So there's this huge debate about the Companies Act and mandating women on boards and how companies have reacted to that. Most of them, the traditional family-owned businesses, have put their own family members on. What's your own take as somebody who's worked her way up Thermax and somebody who's a feminist or believes in equal opportunity? Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
I think there are some women that are extremely capable. It's just that they haven't been given the opportunity. They've had the education, they've had a bit of experience, unfortunately not much experience, but I think if we can give them that experience and we can equip them, I think they would be great to be members on boards. For one, I am not normally for quotas. I don't think that's the right way to go. But having said that, that's the quickest. But I would still feel that a quota is something that shouldn't really last forever. I think it should be in for a time period, and in that time period, we need to do whatever we need to do to get our women up and going and qualified to really take on that role, yeah, so that they really do it on merit, not because you're a woman.
But the reason I asked you about your family and what your mother went through and what you saw her go through is, what you went through is perhaps the worst case scenario, the nightmare of every family, right? Then you suddenly left without the patriarch or the person who's running it. You have multiple crises in business, and how do you bring it together? Looking back at your own journey, what could families do to avoid something like this? Is it then imperative that they get women or a larger pool of people within the business? I mean, what would the advice be to others?
I think businesses today and the world has become so complex that ultimately it is getting the best talent for your business that matters. It could be a family member, it may be a non-family member. So I think avoiding, a conflict like this, or avoiding some sort of, if your patriarch suddenly dies, I think that is an extreme case. And I think for that, yes, maybe you need some experience in terms of bringing family members. But I think for businesses per se, getting the best talent is what is required, irrespective.
Chemical engineer, Meher, it's not a profession many women take, but there are enough women who are getting into mechanical engineering, civil engineering. We don't see them enough in the workforce. From a manufacturing standpoint, from a capital goods company standpoint, does more need to be done to get women into the workforce?
Well, I think many engineers, when we go to campus recruitments, most engineers want to join the IT sector, the financial services sector. It's those are the sort of sexy sectors to be in. Manufacturing, unfortunately, is not so sexy. So yes, how do we bring in more? It's more talent, whether it be men or women. Of course, women are probably only between 6 and 8% in the manufacturing sector today in India, and that needs to be increased hugely. But I think a lot depends on the supply pool as well. It's not that many, at least for us, we need mechanical engineers more than anything, and there aren't that many that get into mechanical engineering. And as I said, those that do want to do these other sort of more sexy jobs. So I think it's getting more women interested into engineering, and then trying to make, I think, the manufacturing sector a little more sort of attractive for women to enter. Otherwise, I think there should be, in terms of policies, very little differentiation between men and women. The more we differentiate, the less men will want us women in the corporate sector, because then they'll say all the goodies are for the women. Why should we?
And it should be performance.
It should be performance based.
Do you feel a lot of women are not trying hard enough? They're not pushing the envelope. They're not taking the more rigorous. Is it also an internal wiring in women?
I think sometimes women tend to take their jobs a little more casually. For a man, they are the breadwinners, so to speak. So they have no choice. They have to be there to earn the salary for the family day in and day out. For a woman, it's almost, for some women, I'm not saying for all, but for many women, it's okay, I'll do it. If I get this job, well and good. If I have my children, I can opt out. When I finish with my children, I can try and opt back in. Even in terms of volunteering for an NGO, it's that casualness. So if I said I'll be giving 1 hour a week, if I can't go, so what? It doesn't really matter. And I think it's that casualness sometimes that comes in the way, is my feeling. I think if we really say that we want a career, we want to make sure that we want to achieve this in life, we'd be far more committed to making it happen no matter what.
You work very closely with Akanksha and Teach for India. Do you think that whole area of volunteering for NGOs, working with NGOs, needs to be opened up also, because it actually allows you great stimulation, it allows you great, it probably uses your talent much better than a 9-to-5 job can. Do you see enough of that happening?
No, unfortunately volunteering is not, it hasn't yet kicked off in a big way in our country. But I think for volunteering to work, it's both. It's for the volunteer to be very committed for that 1 hour or 1 day or whatever it is. And I think it's equally important for the NGO to utilize that person's talent in that 1 hour or 1 week or whatever it is to the fullest extent. Only then will the two really work well. And I think it's taking off. Teach for India today, forget volunteers, but we have fellows in TFI where there are almost 1,000 or over 1,000 of them in 6 cities across India. And we are seeing more and more people, youngsters who are idealistic, who want to give up 2 years of their life and invest it in something like a Teach for India, which is something really wonderful to see in our country.
One wonderful thing about the format of Teach for India and your generation of people in business is also the fact that I think the whole giving back idea has really caught on. And what's interesting is that you use business lessons to put structure and scale to giving back. And I've seen a lot of people do that. So how do you see this progress? And do you think there are early lessons that you can share on this?
Yeah, I mean, for example, in Teach for India, we started off 7 years ago, and this is really Shaheen and her team, but they started off 7 years ago in 1 city. Today they are in 6 cities, and over the next 2 years hopefully we'll be in another 2 cities. So as you rightly said, scale is something that we are seeing, and unless this model lends itself to scale, but having said that, it's still on it's a drop in the ocean, because you're talking about 1,000 fellows probably impacting 16 or 20,000 children. 20,000 is nothing when you think of our country. So yes, we are talking about scale, but more important, we're talking about systems and processes within Teach for India as an NGO. So how do you bring in good processes? How do you bring in financial systems which are robust? How do you attract talent within Teach for India as an organization, not just the fellows, but in terms of within the organization as staff? So it's all the HR, finance lessons that we learn in business that one tries to adopt in an NGO, which I think is very useful.
Last question, Meher. What is the one thing that you've learned from your mother? And what's the one thing that you'd like to advise people who are watching this show, whoever they are, family-owned business women or just women working in organizations, to take it to the next level?
I've learned a lot from my mother, so I can't just say one thing, but I think tenacity, drive, commitment. For her, commitment, even if it is I'm going to get up in the morning and go for my 30-minute walk, I will achieve it, irrespective of whether it's rain, sun or snow. So I think her level of commitment to anything that she takes on is phenomenal, and I think that's something that I really admire about her. With regard to something that I'd like to pass on, I think one message I really would like to give our women is to try and give equal messages to your boy child and girl child. I think very often unknowingly we give messages which are perpetuating achievement needs for men or for boys and affiliative needs for girls, and without even realizing. For example, if I say clear the table, I often say my daughter, please clear the table, little realizing that I'm in a way saying that a boy doesn't clear a table. So I think if we can be very mindful of the messages that we pass on to our children or to any boys and girls in our society, I think that would really help. And maybe one more message is have faith in yourself. I think if you believe in yourself and have commitment to do something and see it to the end, you're capable of doing anything.
Luxury partner, Omega Ladymatic.